This, we, Centrifuge, have really looked forward to this particular event for lots of reasons. Excuse me. Busy week, sore throat already. So I'm going to take a few minutes, 15 in fact, so for those of you that count, probably most of the audience are that way, I give you 15 minutes to do 3 things. First, I want to talk a bit about Centrifuge, because my guess is some of you have not been with us in venues like this. And so I want to storytell a little bit in position so you'll know what Centrifuge does. And then I want to tell a little story about why I wanted to host this event. And third, I'll introduce Ben, our main speaker. So those are the 3 things in 15 minutes. So how many of you have been with Centrifuge in events since I've been in town? Anyone? Raise your hand. Okay, cool, nice. Those that have nodded off, first time at a Centrifuge event, raise your hand. Wow, yay. That's what I like to see. Okay, so my name is Wendy Lee, and I am the CEO of Centrifuge, and sometimes I refer to myself as not the queen of the Queen City, because that would be not right, but as the priestess of #StartupCincy. So when you are with me and see me, kind of know that I have 2 faces. I have an operating role with Centrifuge, and I have this big vision for our region, which is all around building a new economy that has technology as an underpinning of it, right? And that includes startups. Now, when you think of Centrifuge, though, these are the storylines that I encourage you to remember and to share with others so we can continue the momentum that we've developed. Number 1, we're about a hub for technology innovation. A hub that will eventually help us create a new economy whose underpinnings are all about startups, high-growth technology startups. That's number 1, thank you. Number 2 is I love leading, love, this love fest between startups and big companies, large globals, regional organizations. What we can learn from each other is non-trivial. And I am very excited about leading that effort. Now, if you were in my head, that would be an initiative called Customer Connections. But for you, I want you to experience it as HR leaders as a love fest between startups and big co's. That's fun. That makes it more fun, right? Yay. Yes. Number 3, we, Centrifuge, are making big bets through our syndicate fund. Many of your companies are investors. They are limited partners in a fund of funds that we now call a syndicate fund. Why is that important? That's important because the investments that we're making are in VCs outside of this region. So these venture capitalists can come here and engage with us in this beautiful place we call the Queen City. Very important because we need those VCs to look at our startups. We have over 300 startups at many different stages of their life cycle here in the city. These are technology-enabled or based startups. And they need capital to grow, period. And we have capital here, but not enough. So, the founders of Centrifuge, not me, I'm the new CEO, but the founders of Centrifuge decided to make this strategic bet on the syndicate fund. And that's a very important instrument and differentiator for us. So I want you to think about Centrifuge in that way. Then, I just want you to know that at the end of the day, you know Ready, right, as an organization. You know Jonna Reeder. Anyone? Yes? Awesome. One of my best buddies. She got me here. She's part of the recruiting team that got me here. Yes, we're both from the South. That works. But more important than that, we are both part of economic development. Her job, though, is to go out and get large companies to move here, to go out and get call centers to come here, to recruit regional offices to, right? That's her job. My job, our job, is to build a long play around startups, technology startups, high profile, high growth technology startups. Do you understand that? So we're kind of both in economic development, but we do different parts of it. Lastly, one of the things I enjoy the most about being a leader in your beautiful city, now my beautiful city, is delivering unexpected value. And now I'm going to go to describing a little bit what that is. These companies support us. Thank you if you are part of those organizations. Thank you deeply for investing in the fund of funds, the syndicate fund, and investing in our operating budget. It's about a strategy to build the future. It's about a desire to create an interesting place for young people to come or to stay. Very important. We call it Startup Cincy. You've already heard that. Now, here's the positioning I'm going to go to Ben and the whole notion of talent. When you're building a startup economy that has a future impact on a region like ours, you have to soft circle all the assets that sit here naturally. You don't always have the time or money to bring things in, although we are bringing in VCs, I described that. So one of the first things we did is we looked to see what was here naturally, what's organic to us in the greater Cincinnati area. We have 9 accelerators that move forward very interesting startups. The Grandery, Uptech, Ocean, we could go on and on. These are non-trivial groups that are funding and educating entrepreneurs. Be happy we have them, and we need more. We have 4 universities. We love them all, and we're very engaged with them. We have 120 companies, many of them represented here today. So these are the entities or the objects that we have circled in this hashtag Startup Cincy world. And it's that world that we centrifuges are trying to lift up so we can have a future. So what's interesting is when I first got here, and I was so honored to have access to the CEOs of so many companies. I go present to the CBC and the CRDC and the Chamber. I mean, it was like I was the belle of the ball. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting and so much fun. And then I noticed just in casual conversation, this wasn't like a survey I did. I just noticed that there was potentially a need for some new thinking around work. It wasn't thinking around employees or compensation plans or benefits. I was like so new to town. I'm like, my view of work and their view of work is a little different. And I wasn't able to describe it very well, frankly. And by the way, as you can tell, I'm not a kid. I have been around, as they say. That doesn't mean I'm a slut. That just means I've moved around. I've had a lot of jobs, a lot of tours to do. That sounded wrong, I'm sorry. But the point is, I knew that my view of work was different than some of the view of work. I just could tell it. And so I was struggling with how to have a conversation with my peeps, my new peers, your CEOs, because many of you I haven't met. I'm like, what do I say about this? Because they said, well, we want our kids to stay. I'm like, okay, but they may not. Because your view of work is kind of dated. I didn't say it that way, but I was thinking that. So I'm thinking, what can I do in an unexpected way to start the conversation about how work is now, how we as people want to be with others in work. It is different. Now, you're HR leaders. I've never been an HR leader. You can teach me a lot. But as a CEO, many times over, and as a board member, many times over, I just want us as a collective group to begin to think and have a conversation about work in a different way. People do want different things from each other. And by the way, I'm really tired, and I'm going to bring up Ben, I'm really tired of the notion of collaboration equals an open workspace. That's like silly. Like, no, it's not about the chairs or the colors. or the food. It's just not. It's something bigger than that. It's more profound than that. It's about being connected and about understanding who we are as people and what we're trying to accomplish. And by the way, we happen to be working for you for a little while. That's just the truth, right? So that's my riff. I'm very grateful that you're here. We all are. And now let me talk a little bit about them. So there is the LinkedIn profile of all of us. It's so tidy. We started and we ended and we were this person, we were that person, yay us. And okay, so there's the LinkedIn profile of Ben, and I'm sure you hit it, or if you haven't, you will. And you'll get those details, and yay, LinkedIn and those details. So let me tell you about Ben from my perspective. When you are with Ben, you know that he is listening to every word. And when he asks a question, it is very both intentional and very conversational in such a way that you're finding out more about yourself than you ever thought you knew. Right? So that's the Ben I know. Right? It just so happens that he's written a bunch of books and he flies around the world and he was like whatever with Reid Hoffman, his chief of staff, and all that's cool and awesome. But what I know about him is that he's a profound thinker. And he is a very special human being, and it is completely my honor to have Ben with us this morning. So Ben, join me.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Imagine it's your first day of work at a new company, okay? And I'm your hiring manager. So I welcome you on to the company campus. I give you a tour of the facilities. I give you a new t-shirt that has the company logo on it and some fresh business cards with your name and a new title on it. And in general, express wild enthusiasm about your joining the company family. And then after lunch, I sit down with you and I go over some paperwork. And I remind you that this is at-will employment. Which means that I can fire you at any time. Which means that I can fire you for any reason. Which means I can fire you for no reason at all. But once again, welcome to the company family. We're so excited to have you here. You just experienced what we believe is a fundamental disconnect of modern employment, which is that it's based on a dishonest conversation between the company and the employee. The company talks about themselves as a family and kind of expects utter loyalty from the employee while actually not guaranteeing employment and investment. And the employee shows up on the first day with a big smile on their face and says, "This is my dream job," but in fact will leave on a dime the moment a better opportunity presents itself. The employer-employee relationship is broken. And it's broken because for much of the 20th century, organizing your company as a family did make sense and was possible. You know, for my parents' generation, you would go to college and land a degree and land an entry-level job at a big, stable company, and that company would take care of you. That company would invest in you. That company would kind of whisk you up the organizational hierarchy, and you would slowly accumulate more experience and security, and then you'd step off that career escalator at 65, and it'd be a very nice, stable career. Maybe you change jobs, change companies a couple times. But stability reigned. Companies appreciated the predictability and the loyalty that they got from that, and employees appreciated the security that they earned from their employers. But those guarantees and that compact between the company and employee, of course, is no longer affordable today. Companies can no longer afford to offer those guarantees in a world that's much more competitive. In an age where all of us need the latest and greatest talent, We all need to be onboarding employees that have the latest and greatest skills. We can no longer afford to effectively guarantee employment for life. And so the family compact has come undone, and quite understandably, employees have responded in turn. According to many studies, the number of employees who say they have faith and trust in their company and management are at record lows. And so many employees, while they have a big smile on their face and say, "This is my dream job," have one eye on their current job and one eye scanning the horizon, scanning LinkedIn for better and better opportunities. And the number of employees who say they have any sense of loyalty to their company is really a much smaller percentage than it used to be. So the family compact is broken because the company can no longer deliver on the promises that they historically made. And employees, again, quite understandably, are no longer pledging that same type of loyalty. Nonetheless, you still hear a lot of CEOs and executives talk about their companies as families. But we think what they really mean is they're talking about how to treat their employees with compassion, with appreciation, with respect. Those things all still matter. But the notion that the company actually is a family, to use the word, is quite misleading. This is a photo of my family. Many years ago, I'm in the bow tie. And, it would have been unthinkable as a kid for my father to have sat me down and said, "Well, Ben, we're sorry, there's just not a place for you in the Casnochas anymore. Your table setting skills do nothing for our bottom line, and your fascination with the San Francisco Giants just isn't moving the ball forward. So we're going to have to let you go, but don't take it personally, it's just family." So the family compact's over. What have companies done instead? Well, we can see a real transformation by examining the trajectory of GE and how GE has thought about its employees. In 1963, an executive at GE said employee job security is a prime company objective. 1963, employee job security is a prime company objective. Do any of you have employee job security as one of your top strategic priorities for 2015? Fast forward to the early 1990s, Jack Welch says, "It's a global era. At GE, we must now have one-day contracts. Prove yourself every single day, or you're out of a job." In a separate interview, Welch said, "Oh, and if you want loyalty, get a dog." And so what's replaced this family compact for many companies and many executives and HR leaders that are struggling to adapt and realize that they need to always be upgrading their workforce is they minimize the employer-employee relationship, and they begin to treat employees like free agents. They may technically be full-time employees, but they say, "We don't want to make huge investments in our employees if they're just going to leave. We're not going to talk to our employees like we really care about them, because we may need to fire them, or they may leave on their own." And a sort of cynicism pervades the relationship. And again, employees respond in turn, say, "Well, if you're not going to invest in me, if you're not going to guarantee employment to me, if you're not going to train me, then you say I'm going to stick around for a meaningful period of time in your company. And I'm going to respond to that email in this ever-liquid labor market when recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll respond. And if it's a better opportunity, if it pays me a little more, I'm out the door." So this free agent mindset certainly offers flexibility, doesn't it? The employee says, "Look, I'm unattached. The moment something better comes, I'm out the door." And the company says, "The moment our stock price demands that we do layoffs, we'll do it. The moment that we think we could find someone with a slightly better set of skills at a slightly cheaper price, we'll just fire you and hire those people." It certainly enables flexibility, but it doesn't build the kind of relationship between a manager and employee, between employees themselves, that lead to real innovation. To do real innovation, to create long-term value, people do actually need to trust each other. People do need to have relationships with one another. The employee needs to show up every day, not being paranoid that today might be their last day. And the company needs to know that they can make investments in their people and know that the people will stick around for a meaningful period of time to complete long-term important projects. And so this free agent mindset, which is so pervasive among companies struggling to adapt to this ever-changing world, again, offers flexibility but doesn't enable the relationship building that's crucial. So actually, let me ask a quick question before I move on. Wendy's told me a little bit about your guys' backgrounds, but I want to get a sense here at Cincinnati where we are on the tenure spectrum. So when I say go, show me with your fingers 1 through 10. How many years have you been working at your current company? So hold 10 fingers if it's 10 or more, 6, 7, and so on. Go. You see some 10s, see 6s, 7s, actually a lot of 10s. Okay, you put your hands down. How many fingers do you think would be in the air if this were a room full of only millennials? 2. We have a group of expert HR people who probably read the same sorts of studies and statistics that I have. Hard data to actually really get an accurate reading on. But yeah, both anecdote suggests and the data that exists that the average tenure for younger employees is 18 months, 24 months at a company, which I think is just evidence of this shift. The undoing of the family compact is even more accelerated among younger employees. So we've seen this shift from family to free agents. Both have their advantages, both have serious disadvantages. And so over the last few years, Reid Hoffman and Chris Day and I have been thinking about this compact, thinking about the future of work, thinking about how Silicon Valley companies are able to attract and manage and retain amazing employees. And I've come to the following contention, the following thesis, which is that the key to recruiting a great person, the key to managing that person in a way that enables their entrepreneurial instincts to flourish, and the key to actually retaining that person for a much longer period of time than you ever would have thought possible, is to stop treating that person, stop treating your employees like family members or like free agents, and start treating them as allies. Allies on a tour of duty. In an alliance, both sides come together and try to add value to the other. So in the old days, the company and the employee would look at each other, and the company would say, okay, you value stability in your career and in your life. We value stability as a company. Let's be stable together. In the modern era, in a modern alliance, the company and employee look at each other. And the company says to the employee, you need adaptability in your career. You're going to have a long career that consists of many jobs, many companies over a very long period of time. You need adaptability in your career. And we need adaptability as a company. The world's changing. We need to always be adapting, learning, and innovating. So let's be adaptable together. So an alliance, an employment relationship that has the structure of an alliance is characterized by mutual investment, mutual benefit, and therefore mutual trust. The company invests in the employee invests in the company, and both sides benefit. The company is more adaptable, and the employee's careers improve. The employee's market value goes up. The employee's LinkedIn profile looks more impressive as a result of that mutual investment. Now, if you construct an alliance, we think you have the opportunity to recruit the kind of people who are the hardest to recruit in this economy, but who are the most important people to produce actual innovation in your business. And I want to tell you the story of one kind of person who we have in mind. We think this alliance structure is critical if you want to have a chance of being able to retain this sort of employee. His name is John Lasseter. Any of you know the name John Lasseter? A few of you. You may not know his name, but you certainly know his work. John Lasseter was the co-creative genius behind the most successful movies in movie history. Toy Story, most notably Finding Nemo, Monsters, Inc. He's Chief Creative Officer at Walt Disney Animation Studios. And John Lasseter has had a fascinating career, and I think we can learn a lot from his career trajectory. So currently, he's Chief Creative Officer at Walt Disney Animation Studios. He actually began his career many years ago at Disney as a young animation designer, where he was developing animated films using pen and paper. Now, one day, John Lasseter went to a conference, went to an event, and listened to a speaker. And that speaker was riffing on the future of animation technology. And the speaker had claimed that there was kind of these mainframe computers that were going to be able to do computer-generated graphics in a far more efficient way than how animated movies were historically created with pen and paper. And this got Lasseter very excited. He went back to the Disney office and he shared what he learned with his colleagues. And he had a vision. He said, maybe we can create an entire feature film that consists of nothing but computer-generated graphics. An entire feature animated film, of course, nothing but computer-generated graphics. And he kind of wrote up this pitch and sat down with his manager and delivered the pitch. Now we know that his vision for Toy Story, one of the most successful movies ever made, we know how successful that was. So we can imagine, of course, that his manager would have any number of plausible replies. And think about how you would respond. You have this young animator with kind of this big, bold idea. Maybe you say, okay, let's pair you with a mentor at the firm and kind of have you guys work in tandem to develop this idea. Or, screw it, we need to take risk, no reward, green light, good luck, can't wait to see what you build. Or let's start with a 5-minute short before we try to develop a full-length feature film. What did John Lasseter's manager say instead? He said, you're fired. He was fired that day, the day he delivered the pitch. His manager told him explicitly, we're tired of you screwing around on things that have nothing to do with your day job. Now, John Lasseter, being the kind of entrepreneurial employee we all want and need in our companies, when he heard you're fired, it fired him up. And he teamed up with Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull and founded Pixar. It was at Pixar where he realized his vision of creating a full-featured animated film. Truly innovative, groundbreaking step in cinema. Now, a few years ago, Disney realized that they had made a massive mistake firing John Lasseter. And they begged for him to come back. And Lasseter said he'd be delighted to, but they're going to have to pay. So Disney acquired Pixar for more than $7 billion. And that's how John Lasseter ended up back at Disney, where he's their chief creative officer. Now, there are a few lessons I take from John Lasseter's career story. The first is that if you get fired, it's not the end of the world. Anyone here been fired? Anyone here wish they'd been fired from a job? Yeah, 2 hands up in the back. Another lesson I take more seriously from Lasseter's story is that if you don't have a culture that celebrates entrepreneurial thinking, if you don't have colleagues who are thinking entrepreneurial, if you don't have managers who celebrate that spirit, a single person that has a big, bold idea will fail. They will fail if they're on their own. And the final lesson speaks more directly to the work that many of you are engaged in, the work of management, the work of HR. I mean, if we wanted to be hyperbolic, we could argue that John Lasseter's manager at Disney made a $7 billion mistake firing him that fateful day. I think we can agree that's a mistake none of us can afford to make. So the questions that I want to spend the morning talking about, and then we'll lead into the panel to continue the discussion, is how do you recruit someone like John Lasseter to your company? How do you manage them effectively? What philosophy do you need to have to cultivate their entrepreneurial instincts? And how do you actually retain them for longer than you ever thought possible? Because we believe that entrepreneurial employees, innovative employees, creative employees, are demanding a different sort of value proposition from their employers. They're demanding something like an alliance. They're expecting their career to be transformed as a result of having worked at your company. And while they work at your company, they're expecting the kind of autonomy and cultural creativity to enable them to do their best work. So how do you recruit, manage, and retain amazingly entrepreneurial employees? Well, as we said, it starts with an alliance. It starts with an acknowledgement that lifetime employment's over, in that the new employer-employee compact is premised on mutual investment and mutual benefit. The company saying, if you work here, we will help transform your career on the condition that you help transform our company. That's the high-level premise. But the way you organize the alliance, the way you kind of choreograph the progressive levels of commitment between the company and the employee is through a framework that we call tours of duty. Think about any relationship in life, romantic, friendship. You don't have someone to marry you on the first date. You don't have someone to be your best friend the very first time you have coffee with them. Isn't it odd then that in employment, the day one conversation sounds an awful lot like, we're so excited to have you here forever. Far better to delineate the terms of employment into discrete chunks, to kind of bring a sort of crisp focus to the nature of the relationship by defining discrete tours of duty by which the employee will commit to the employer and the employer will commit to the employee. So a tour of duty first has a mission objective. The employee needs to know what he or she is going to do at your company. Now, there are a lot of really amazing companies in this region. Companies that have been around for a long time, that have done real innovation, and that have a pretty inspiring mission and a pretty credible case that they're really changing the world on a massive scale. But if you're not at the very top of one of these organizations, the mission statement of the company is an insufficient true north for what that employee is trying to get out of their employment. I'll give you an example. At LinkedIn, the mission of the company is to connect talent with opportunity at massive scale. It's a very inspirational mission. There's all these case studies of people who found their dream job through LinkedIn. It's a very inspirational place to work. But if you're Jeff Weiner or Reed, you get fired up by that because you're on the front lines of seeing that mission manifest in the world. If you're 3 or 4 levels down in the org, if you're a data scientist in the talent solutions group or something, you know that that's the mission in some abstract sense, but you don't really feel like you touch it day to day. You're involved in a discrete part of the organization. And so for you to get meaning out of your work, and I'm sure you guys are also familiar with the studies around millennials and their quest for meaning, for you to feel meaning out of your work, you need to know that there's some mission that you're on that's tangible, that's discrete, in that if achieved, will really help transform the company and transform your career. So mission objective might be, over the next 18 months, we're going to ship this new product. And that's going to be really important for the company because of the following. And by you doing that, your career will be improved in the following ways. You'll learn the following skills. You'll list the following publications on your LinkedIn profile. You'll be a co-author on the following sort of patent. You will have grown your professional network in a certain important way. It's being quite specific about what the mission is: ship a new product, grow a sales team by a certain amount, grow revenue, whatever it is. And it's being specific about how the company and the employee will both benefit. And then, crucially, and this is what's hard for managers sometimes to do, is to talk openly about a time horizon that's realistic. So when we're working on the book and talking to a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, outside Silicon Valley, we heard some pretty consistent data points on time horizon. So Eric Schmidt at Google told us that Google thinks about tours of duty is 2 to 5 years, an initial tour of duty. A year or 2 to learn the job, a year or 2 to do the job, a year or 2 to transition to successor. It really will depend on what the right length of time is. And it's not fixed in a contract. It's rather an expectation setting. The company says, look, we're going to invest in you to do great work at this company. And as part of that investment, we're going to expect you to stick around for 3 years or 4 years to get this meaty project done. And in exchange, what we can commit to you is that once you achieve that project, your LinkedIn profile will look different in the following sort of way. Once you've defined a tour of duty that has that time horizon, you now have a natural cadence for checking in. I'm sure we've all read performance reviews are totally screwed up, massively demoralizing, and so on. I was just with the head of talent at Adobe. This woman, Donna Moore, she's really this incredible force. And she has this great story about she's abolished annual performance reviews at Adobe. And she abolished it through accidentally telling a reporter in India that she was going to, and it became a headline news. And she's replaced annual performance reviews with a process she calls check-ins. And it's consistent with much of the research that's come out about employee engagement and morale, which is a kind of continuous check-in process by which feedback's exchanged is far better than a once-a-year annual review process. In the spirit of alliance, a check-in or a performance review is bidirectional. The company's giving feedback to the employee, but also the employee's giving feedback to you on how are you making good on your promise of increasing their market value, of increasing the impressiveness of their LinkedIn profile. It's a two-way conversation, and the frequency with which you have the conversations is grounded by the nature of the tour duty. Does that make sense? Okay. The book I wrote with Reed prior to the Alliance was a book called The Startup Review, and it was a book geared to individual professionals. So the Alliance is for managers and HR leaders and CEOs. Startup Review is for individual professionals. In the process of writing the Startup Review, I had the unfortunate obligation of reading as many books about careers as I could find to effectively do competitive research. I say unfortunate because the vast majority of books are not very good. One of the things that was striking was just how dated so much classic career advice is. The number one career book remains What Colors Your Hair for 30 years running, 100,000 copies a year. And one of the reasons the books I find are inadequate is that they presume a level of knowledge that the employee will have about their life and their career that's just unrealistic. I mean, if you could simply ask an employee, what are you passionate about, what do you want to do when you get older, and they had a crisp, tidy answer, gosh, all of our jobs would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? So you tend to have to go at those questions indirectly. You tend to have to go at those questions through a process of conversation. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it is important to understand what an employee wants to do with their life. It is important to be able to print out their LinkedIn profile and to circle the descriptions that they want rewritten, or to kind of draft a little recommendation that might exist in the future that they would want to list on their profile. You want to have some sense of their aspirations, because it's important to align their mission in life, their aspirations, their values with the company's. And the reason this is so hard for so many companies to do is that historically, in the old company man, company woman relationship, the company mission and aspirations would just subsume the employees. The notion was, you're a company man. 100% of your aspirations and values are aligned with the company's by default. Today, in the modern world, in a world where lifetime employment's over, as a company, as HR leaders, you want to proactively acknowledge the fact that there will be misalignment. When you sit down with employees and talk about their career, what if they want to start their own company someday? What if they want to leave Cincinnati at some point and live in Shanghai? Or what if they want to actually change their line of work dramatically? It might not be aligned with their current tour of duty, but by understanding those aspirations and being able to align 60% or 70% of the aspirations, you have a far better chance of keeping them maximally engaged while they're here. So when we work with companies, we almost coach managers on how to do this. We almost have a Venn diagram and say, here are the company's needs, here are the employees' needs, here's where there's overlap, and by the way, here's where there's not overlap, and that's totally okay. Now, when we ask ourselves, what gets a really talented employee fired up to want to work at one of our companies? What do we think drives it? You can shout it out. What do you think really fires up someone to want to work at a company? Who has ideas?
Opportunity.
Opportunity for what? For growth. Lifestyle.
Ability to influence positive change.
Ability to influence positive change in the organization. Yep.
Money.
Money. Energy.
Company mission.
Company mission. I think a lot of those are certainly excellent ideas and components. stunning colleagues, for sure. At LinkedIn, there's a saying of the value proposition to employees, the opportunity to transform themselves, transform the company, and transform the world. That encompasses a lot of the concepts you all just threw out. The way you transform the company and transform yourself is usually through working with stunning colleagues. But note that, contrary to what a lot of you, this is a sophisticated group, of course, a lot of people, a lot of unsophisticated thinkers and doers in this space, of course, obsess around perks and being in Silicon Valley, as Wendy alluded to. It's just maddening to read these profiles that obsess about the Google Nap Pods and the delicious food in the cafeterias and so on, which is like ascribing the power of a Ferrari to its red paint job. It obscures what's really happening. What really are these companies doing to engage and attract amazing people? What really are they offering? And for really talented people, one way to think about it is the opportunity to transform themselves, i.e. transform their career growth, the opportunity to transform the company, actually having a mission objective and understanding how it connects to the big picture, and then the opportunity to transform the world, which means the work the company is engaged in has some meaningful impact beyond some meaningful purpose. Now, in tech companies, we estimate that 80% of employees are on what we call transformational tours of duty, which means the payoff of completing the tour of duty leads to transformation for both company and employee. But it's not the only type of tour of duty. Different employees expect and sometimes need different things. So in a high-growth, fast-changing industry, where the company's constantly adapting, needing new skills, new products, constant reinvention, you need employees who are similarly committed to utter transformation. That's why the tech industry, the fastest moving part of the economy, tends to be 80+% of employees on these transformational tours of duty. In the book, The Alliance, we articulate a couple other types of compacts, a couple other types of tours of duty that a company can forward with an employee. One of those types is the foundational tour of duty. The foundational tour of duty has a much longer time horizon, a time horizon that's much more akin to the old school lifetime employment model. It's not lifetime employment, but it's an expectation where the employee says, gosh, I really can't imagine myself working anywhere else. And the company telling the employee, yeah, and you're really part of the emotional and intellectual fabric of this business. And that continuity is important to us over the long term, to have these kind of cultural stewards. So most CEOs of companies are on foundational tours of duty, like the captain of the ship. But then throughout an organization, there'll be people, even quite junior employees, that have a different sort of time horizon with their business. And they're not expecting career transformation. In fact, perhaps they do value stability a little bit more than the opportunity to transform themselves. And that's totally okay. So one of the messages for this morning is that when you think about your company culture, when you think about your employee value proposition, you think about your recruiting efforts, it seems unwise to think that you can have kind of one monolithic approach to everybody in your organization. I had a meeting recently. I was with the exec team of a 60,000 person company, an old school company called many of you have heard of, that's undergoing rapid transformation. And I was just struck by how the team, the exec team, used words like culture and employees as if they apply to everyone. In fact, this company has 20,000 people who work in a call center, 30,000 people who they describe as low-level service employees, and then 2,000 people at this tech labs in New York who are kind of ex-Googlers, they said, working on reinventing their software offering. And you think about, what is an ex-Google data scientist going to look for out of their employment at this company? What is their likely time horizon and trajectory versus the call center employee in some other part of the country? Vastly different expectations, right? And yet they use words like culture and employee value proposition as if it's a totalizing concept. So I think you need to have different value props for different employees. What we tend to emphasize and what we tend to focus on as authors and as we work with companies is those entrepreneurial employees, the ones who are hardest to recruit, manage, and retain. Because they're the ones who are least served with the old way of thinking. They're the ones who demand a transformational tour of duty. They're They're the ones who demand a stimulating, honest career conversation with their manager. But not everyone will have that expectation. In a slower moving company, in a slower moving industry, in a labor market where there's less liquidity, maybe it's only 40 or 50% of people who have transformational toward duty. One thing's for certain though, the world is moving towards faster change, faster competition, faster mobility in the labor market. So we think all companies are moving towards a model where there'll be a lot more turnover, and there'll be expectations for employees that they actually get career security. In an era where job security is over, they're going to be expecting the opportunity to bulletproof their LinkedIn profile. They're going to want to know that they're going to learn skills that will increase their market value over the long term. So here's a quick poll for all of you, because we've talked about millennials a couple times. When I say go, show me with your arms, how entitled are the millennials that you work with? And the way we'll model this is, how big of a head do they have about their life? So hold your hands right at the top of your head if you think they're totally grounded in reality, have perfect expectations, pay their dues, all that, and hold your hands really far out above your head if you think their head's just way bigger than reality at the companies that you all work for. Go. Very cool. Okay, put your hands down. An interesting mix, but I didn't see many people's hands touching their hair or their head directly. So I think we all acknowledge there tends to be some sort of gap between expectations and realities. And this is a topic that keeps coming up for us when we talk about the Alliance, because a lot of companies are like, this is what we need for especially our millennial employees. These millennial employees are demanding this promise of transformation. But there's so much cynicism about millennials among HR leaders in particular, and executives in general, and words like entitlement and other sorts of words that imply character flaws are thrown around. Here's what I think about millennials. I think millennials have been given bad career advice. I think millennials have been reading What Colors Your Parachute too many times. I think millennials believe, due to no fault of their own, that a career is like the career their parents had, which is a slow and steady march up a career ladder. And what progress means is you've gone from junior manager to senior manager to director to senior director in one company. That's the old linear career. The modern career, of course, is very different. And one of the things that's beholden upon all of us when we manage, and especially millennials, is we help them understand what that modern career looks like. And we help define what transformation means in their context. So what does it mean to transform your career? And I'll give you an example. Suppose you have an employee walk into your office, and they can pick between one of two paths in their career. One path, they could go from junior manager to manager and make $55,000 to $62,000 annual salary. In another path, they could stay junior manager, they could stay making $55,000 a year, but through your particular sponsorship and mentorship, they would build relationships with 3 really important people in the industry over the next year. What's the smarter path to take if you're optimizing solely on career ambition? You could argue it's the latter. You could argue that today, the only thing people take with them when they leave a company is their network. Your network stays with you forever. And the network is one of our most powerful assets. And a company and a manager that enables you to grow your network is doing far more for your career development than an incremental title boost or an incremental boost in compensation. In the long run, a stronger professional network will lead not only to more cash comp and more traditional success metrics, but also most likely to a more emotionally fulfilling life. So what does transformation really mean? What does the modern career look like? Resetting expectations on that level is the key to leading a productive career conversation, and key to level setting expectations when you talk about defining a transformational toward duty. Now, sometimes we say that these concepts is just advanced common sense. Not rocket science here, but we take concepts that resonate, concepts that most of us recognize in the real world, and then attach some language and frameworks that make the concept sticky. And with that common language, it's able to spread in an organization. So on one hand, these alliance ideas and the idea of a tour of duty is just advanced common sense. On the other hand, having career conversations at work today is really, really hard. One of the most clicked on ads in LinkedIn history is a University of Phoenix ad that ran at the top of the homepage that said, how to have better one-on-one conversations at work. It's an online class. I talk to managers all the time. People are terrified of leading one-on-one conversations. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to start the conversation. They don't know how to end the conversation. They don't know how to schedule a conversation without freaking out the employee. And then when it comes to their career, it's even harder. It's like, okay, you know you're probably going to leave at some point. I know you're probably going to leave at some point. I probably shouldn't talk about that because that's weird because I'm your manager. So let's just have a dishonest conversation instead. To have a high-trust career conversation, honesty must prevail. And I'll give you an example of an honesty technique. The SVP of Engineering at LinkedIn, this guy, Kevin Scott, asks candidates, not employees, candidates who are applying to jobs at the company, what job do you want to have after you leave LinkedIn? You haven't even started working here, but I have a sense that it's just unlikely that 100% of your aspirations and values in life will be encompassed by this one company. So talk to me about what you're thinking about doing over the medium term. Talk about that job that you want to have after this job. The more I can understand that, the more likely it is that I can craft a tour of duty that moves you closer to those ultimate aspirations while also moving the needle for us as a company. Through that one gesture, he creates an atmosphere of honesty, an atmosphere of trust. If the employee doesn't trust their manager, a productive career conversation will not ensue. Here's a question to think about for all of you. If one of your employees was thinking about leaving the company, would he or she come to you early in the process and share those musings, share those vague intents? Or would they go behind your back, arrange the opportunity, and sign on the line and then give you 2 weeks' notice? We think a worthy aspiration for all managers is to earn the right of first conversation. To have such a high-trust relationship with your employee, and for them to know that you will be an ally to them in their career, that if they're unsatisfied at work, if they feel like their tour of duty isn't getting it done for them, or if they get approached by another company, they will come to you first, because they know you won't just selfishly act in the interest of the company, but instead you'll be an ally to them, and you'll help them work through that new opportunity. If you earn that right of first conversation, you gain the predictability that we all crave in an increasingly unpredictable world. Because nothing's more disruptive to our companies than people who show up in the middle of an important project and decide to leave. The way you earn that predictability is through a series of high-trust career conversations, so you can track where they are on their broader trajectory. So this is a skill that most managers do not naturally have. We think, and this is what we help managers do most often, we think it's at the heart of everything else in talent management. I'm amazed when I go into companies and I hear about all these management training programs they have, and it's all these fancy things like, we have a 6-letter acronym for how to give feedback, and the acronym is feedback, and the F stands for forward thinking, and the E is enlightened, and so on. Some of those are decent acronyms, but it's all tactics. If you don't have a foundation of trust between the manager and employee, the tactics don't matter. So you have to start by coaching your managers on building that trust. And we think that process happens best when the manager is seen as an ally to that employee's career as opposed to a selfish, self-interested manager for the company. Once you build that trust, then layer on top of that all the other management skills that are really, really important. And the alliance idea is the notion of bidirectional value, touch up against other important and interesting topics like compensation and all that kind of stuff. But start by coaching managers in how to lead a productive career conversation. Start by surveying, I'm sure many of you do, survey your employees. Ask them, how many of you confidentially have had a high-quality career conversation with your manager in the last 12 months? Solicit feedback and commit to improving that part of the process, and then build from there. Now, the alliance ideas in this framework, if you're sold or if you're intrigued, we think have relevance across the full life cycle of employment. So recruiters trying to close a great candidate, they now have a value proposition that can really resonate with a star employee. If you come work here, we will transform your career. Simple as that. That's very compelling to an ambitious employee. And then the day-to-day management. The day-to-day management on whom the challenge of talent management falls. Those are the leaders that are leading these career conversations. How are they engaging with the employee and crafting these scores of duty? And then all the way through the exit process. Lifetime employment may be over, but a lifetime relationship can and should endure. And so as leaders in HR, I suggest to all of you, formalize, if it's not formalized, the corporate alumni network, or start a new one from scratch. And celebrate those who completed honorably a tour of duty at your company. And commit to maintaining a relationship with those people through the rest of their career. Look no further than professional services firms for insight on how to do this. Anyone who's worked at McKinsey knows that the very first time you talk to a recruiter at McKinsey, they tell you, you may only do one tour of duty here, 2 tours of duty, but you'll be a McKinsey alum for life. I think this is lots of low-hanging fruit for all companies. I saw an article in Business Week that I'm sure was planted by J. Crew PR. There's an entire article about how if you want to start your career in fashion, there's no better place to do it than J. Crew. Just look at all their alumni and all the amazing things J. Crew alumni have gone on to do. You can have that brand, that talent brand for your company. Okay, so let me summarize where we've been and then I'll wrap up. We talked about how the employment relationship starting on day one is what we believe a dishonest conversation that reveals how the family compact has come undone. Understandably, a lot of companies have moved to thinking of their employees like free agents. That doesn't work, that has flaws as well. The middle ground that we advise is an alliance. Try to recapture the loyalty and trust we've lost over the last 15 or 20 years, while also building in the flexibility that both sides require in the modern economy. The way you organize that alliance is through a series of tours of duty. For your best employees, they're going to demand the promise of transformation. And if you have transformational tours of duty at your company, you'll be able to recruit, manage, and retain people like John Lathner, people that really can change everything for the better. So imagine it's your first day of work at a new company, and I'm your hiring manager, and I welcome you onto the company campus, and I give you a tour of the facilities, and I give you a new t-shirt with the company logo on it, and some fresh business cards with your name on it, and in general express wild enthusiasm about joining the company team. Then after lunch, before going over some of the HR paperwork, I begin our conversation with 3 very powerful words. We are allies. And I talk about how if you do great work at this company, we will help transform your career. And I know you're not going to spend your whole life at this company. So let's ethically commit to a realistic period of time over which you'll do great work and we'll invest in you. And then let's check in, manager and employee, over time to make sure this relationship's working for both of us. Imagine how different of a conversation that is. The emotional tenor of that conversation versus the traditional day one conversation. That can be your company. We think it starts with the alliance framework. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ship the program. Thank you very, very much. Ben's not going anywhere. He's going to hang with us, and then he's got to ship out quickly to CBG. But for now, I think stand up, move around a few minutes. We've got to reset the stage. We've got some very esteemed panelists and guests.